I want to thank the four of you. The planning group for Jewish storytelling has been working so hard for most of the year, and I'm just so grateful that you've put so much into it. So, uh, without further ado, please go ahead. It's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Eric. And
Barry,
we're
I want to jump in and do something that we didn't talk about, and
oh, go ahead, Howard.
it'll only take a moment. This is my life. This is what matters to me. Our story about Elijah's violin brought to mind a tragic incident that happened in Aurora, Colorado, where a young African American man named Elijah McLean, who himself was a violin player, who would go to the local shelters to play his violin for the cats and the dogs in the shelter, was walking back one day and was, I would say, murdered by the police. And it was a tragic story. He was a beautiful young man from everything I've read. And all I want to say is I would like to honor him by saying this story that we're telling, at least from my perspective, is for Elijah's memory.
Thank you,
Thank
Howard.
you, Howard.
Thank you,
And
Howard.
It's interesting because if you go online and search for Elijah's violin, you will find links that lead you to this story, but you will also find links that lead you to Elijah McLean and his violin. So thank you, Howard. And we're delighted to be with you all today. And thank you for those in India for staying up this late, and everywhere else, whatever time you are, we thank you for being with us. We have made an attempt to play with a story that comes to us in a couple of versions, and we are bringing together our four storytelling styles. What we're going to do is we're going to be coming and going. We're going to be spotlighting ourselves and unspotlighting ourselves. We recommend that you keep it on speaker view, because then you will see the spotlit people as you go. But of course, it's up to you if you want to go to gallery and look at other people's responses as we go. And we have loosely interpreted this wonderful story. Please keep your mics off, but hopefully at the end there will be time that we can chat and hear some views about what you thought about not only the story, but our telling of the story. As I said, we have four styles, so we're going to be coming and going. There is a Jewish tradition called, Karen, how do you pronounce it?
It's called Chevruta. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because I don't want any of our listeners to think that we're being rude when we interrupt each other, because we are going to be telling this story in a Chevruta style, meaning that we will interrupt each other, have some dialogue, try to interpret parts of the story. We're going to make meaning out of the text that's very old, and hopefully you'll be able to do the same.
And it reminds me of when I was a young man. I went to Israel, and I was in Jerusalem, and I studied at a yeshiva, which is a school for Jewish learning. And I was very surprised that the central room for the Jewish learning was called the Beit Midrash, which is kind of the house of study, which was equivalent to a library. And coming from the United States, I'm used to a library being a very quiet place. But this place was as loud as you can imagine, a place of discourse and disputation. And so we are not going to be disputing very much, but we are in some ways following in that tradition, bringing the tradition. Howard, did you want to say something on this?
No, I'll interrupt later.
Okay.
But just know, as long as you've asked me, just know that it is culturally common, normal, for Jewish people to interrupt each other and to expand the conversation. By the way, I'm married to a non-Jewish woman who has yet to learn to appreciate my interrupting her.
We call it finishing each other's sentences.
Thank you, Eric. And on that note, let's go ahead and get into the story of Elijah's violin.
Once there was a king. The king was preparing to go to war, and he said to his subjects, "If we win, I would like to bring you back gifts." And his subjects came to him, and they told him what they wanted. Some of them wanted gold, some wanted jewels, some wanted coins from faraway places. And then the king turned to his 3 daughters, and he said, "I would like to bring each of you a gift. What would you like?" His eldest daughter said, "Daddy, you know how much I like bling and jewelry. I want you to bring me some very blingy jewelry, maybe a brooch." His middle daughter said, "Father, you know that I am a princess and I love to be stylish. Please bring me back the latest fashion, designer, of course." "And what about you, my dear?" he said to his youngest daughter. "What would you like?" "Father, I just want you to come back safely." "Well, that's very kind indeed, but I am asking you, what gift would you like?" "Father, I don't want you to bring me anything. I just want you to come back safely." Now, if this story were being told now, and the king was living now, we would say that he and his daughter had different love languages. His love language was obviously the love language of gift giving, and hers was more the love language of feeling. Or it could be that we interpret this to mean that he wanted her to request a gift, because in the request of a gift, if he was able to deliver that gift, it means that he would be coming back safely. "I will give you 3 days to come up with a gift." "Okay, Father, what shall I wish for? I don't need anything. I'm trying to declutter. I have so much stuff. What shall I wish for?" As she was lamenting her fate, what to wish for, along came an old woman. And the old woman,
One moment here, one moment.
wait,
Am I hearing in this story that there's a king with 3 daughters and he
yes,
asks
yes,
them
yes,
to answer something?
yes,
Is that true?
yes, yes, it's true. Who are you? Why are you interrupting me at a key
I'm a
point
king
in my
myself.
story?
I'm a king myself, and I have to tell you, this is not good. Let me tell you, I had a similar experience. I asked my daughters to tell me something, to tell me how much they love me. The 2 oldest, they answered well, but the youngest did not, and it did not lead to good things. I ended up out on a rocky moor going, howl, 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 howl.
How?
Howl, 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 howl. I'm King Lear, for goodness sake. And all I can say is I hope this story doesn't end the way mine did, because it wasn't very good. So beware
What
to
should
that
I
king.
do?
Well,
King, what should I do?
Well, I hope that your young princess has a better way of answering her father and comes up with something better than Cordelia did, and that he responds better. That's all I have to say. Good day.
The princess thought and thought. It was probably obvious that she was lost in thought as she was sitting on a rock thinking. And along came an old woman. And the old woman said, "I see that you are lost in thought, my dear." "Yes, I am." "Well, I can read your mind. And I think that your father has asked you to tell him what you wish for him to bring you back." "This is true," she said. "Well, you must ask for Elijah's violin." "Violin? But I'm not a musician. I took piano lessons when I was young and I wasn't very good at it." "Just ask. Just ask."
Well, but a violin is very much from what we would call the Ashkenazi tradition, very mainstream European, Germanic. because there's a whole other wing to the Jewish people, the Sephardim, the people who are perhaps darker skinned, of Spanish origin, from the Moors land. And they wouldn't talk about a violin, they would talk about an oud. Which is, if you see an oud, it's big and round, and it looks like a grumpy face with a spiky hairstyle. There, see it before you, that angry face with the big rump in back. That's what we should think about, maybe, no?
Well, I think you're right, Howard. Maybe we should be thinking about the oud, but some of you may be thinking to yourself, I've never heard an oud. I don't even know what an oud is. And I must say that many years ago, I had no idea what an oud was either. That is, until I was recording my first tape. Yeah, this was how long ago it was. It was before the days of CD. And I was in a studio when the producer of my tape said, how would you like the sound of the oud on your tape? And I said, what's an oud? What's an oud? And he said, well, you will hear, because one of the greatest oud players of all time, John Belazikian, is recording an album at this very studio. Perhaps he will play on your tape. And guess what? He said yes. And this is a little excerpt of the sound of his oud. Thank you, John.
Well, so the king went off to war, and that's what kings do. They fight wars, like presidents and dictators. The king went off to war, and he won. He won the war. Oy, such a marvelous thing, right? He went.
Hooray!
That's more. Mazel tov. That means good.
Mazel tov!
Oy, I'm kvelling. Tell them what that means, too. But after the war, the king went and he bought the gifts for the people of the palace and his eldest daughters. But you know what he forgot? He forgot the oud. And on the way, the ship stopped, and the sailors asked the king, have you forgotten something? Why is the ship stopping? I mean, we're in the middle of the water. Why are we stopping? Well, the king thought and thought until he remembered. I know now. I know. It's the gift for my young daughter. Now, you can't turn a ship like you can a car. But so the ship continued on its way until they reached land. And there they continued until they came, after many hardships, such hardships. And they met an old man, and they asked him about oud lis. An oud lis, he replied, is the son of the local king. But do not be angry, my king. Maybe what your daughter really wants, but doesn't know about it, maybe she wants something other than a musical instrument. He said, so what I would do, I'm an old man. What do I know? But if I were you, I would go to the old man and ask him for oud lis. And if your daughter asks you immediately upon your return, where is the gift? It's a sign that she knows about it.
Howard, I need to interrupt right now. I'm confused. Are you suggesting that Elijah's violin could be Elijah's ood, or is it Elijah the ood, or is Elijah the ood a prince? And it was the old woman, was she creating a shidduch, you know, matchmaking?
Wait a second, wait, can I interrupt?
Okay.
I need to interrupt here because I need to clarify something. Elijah can come in many forms. Elijah's stories are about that amorphic character that comes in and out of people's lives to grant wishes, to make things come true. Elijah could be an old man, a woman, a young man. Maybe we're talking about Elijah in that way.
As we all know, folk tales have many meanings, some on the surface, some more subliminal. We don't know exactly, but we do know that the king wanted to bring a special gift back. And was it Elijah himself? Was it a prince? Was it a beautiful musical instrument to be strummed like a fiddle, like a violin, or plucked maybe, like an oud? Who knows? But let's continue with our tale.
So the king, he left his soldiers, his soothsayers, his wise men that he traveled with, and he told them, you camp here. This is a quest that I must do by myself. And off he went to this palace in search of Elijah's oud or Elijah's violin. We don't really know, but off he went. But he was also told by this old gentleman that there was in this palace, in this version, a princess who was turned to stone. And so he went. At the gates, he announced that he was there to help with this princess, to help her get out of this enchantment. And immediately the guards had been instructed that they were to bring whoever came to the palace right to the king and queen if they were there to help. Now the king in the palace with his wife, the queen, he looked at this man traveling and he realized he was of royal vintage. And he said, sir, I'm happy that you've come to help with my daughter, but you understand that if you should fail, death will come to you as it has to everyone else. The king, the traveling one, he laughed. He said, I have been victorious in every single battle that I have done. And I have gifts that I am bringing back to everyone in my land, and that ensures that I will come back safely. So tell me, what is it I must do? Where is this princess of stone? And so the king and the queen, they took the traveling king into a very obscure part of the palace. No windows, no doors, no furniture, just a stairwell. And they told him that they'd find the princess of stone at the top. He began to climb up, up, up. Soon that straight stairwell started to wind and turn, and he continued to go all the way. At the very top, just a door, no hallway. He put his hand on the knob, he turned it and pushed it open. A chill air greeted him. And in front of him, on the wall, was this magnificent mirror within a golden frame. But what he saw next completely shocked him. A princess, neither alive nor dead, stone. Now I digress here for a minute. I'm sure maybe you have conjured in your mind what this princess actually looks like, but I must admit, I did struggle. Was she in a huge rectangular mirror? Could you see her full body? If she was stone, did they move her? Was she on a bed? Was she lying down? Was she sitting? Was she in or was she out? I don't know. I just could not figure this out. But one night, as I was struggling, I was heading towards my bedroom, walking down the hall, about to turn off the light when I glanced at a newly acquired piece of artwork that is on my wall. And it's a mirror within a frame. And there is a princess. Well, I think she's a princess. There's a woman, well, hanging out, as you can see now. And as soon as I looked at her, I thought, the princess, there she is. That's how she looks. I called my dad immediately because it's actually a piece that was hanging in their condominium in Florida, which they sold during the pandemic. And I had someone go in and take her out just before the keys were handed over. And I drove to Florida to pick her up. And well, as you can see, I now have a princess of my own that I rescued. But let's get back to the story. So the king, he looks at her, and as I said, she's neither alive nor dead, and yet, have you come to help me get out of this predicament? He was stunned. You speak? Yes, it's the only thing that this reflection has left me with. Well then, dear princess, please tell me more of your story. I wish to listen. Well, I've always been a curious child and young woman. And one day I was just meandering through the paths in an area I had never been in before. And I took the stairwell as you just have. And when I reached the top, I opened the door and well, oh, don't you think this is a beautiful mirror? Well, I did what all girls would do if you have daughters. I looked in the mirror. I smiled. My reflection smiled back. I winked. She winked. Oh, we played with each other for quite some time. I moved my scarf off my head and I lowered it over my eyes, and we even played peekaboo, and I thought we were getting along real well until I got a little silly, carried away perhaps. I stuck my tongue out at her. And then, I guess she was cross. She stole right out from the mirror and she turned me around and she started to push me all the way in, and I resisted, and well, this is how I remain. The king, wanting to hear more from her, asked a simple question. Do you know where your reflection is? And does she talk to you at all? She is running around the palace now. She is my imposter. She's pretending to be me. And every time people come close to her, she simply hides away in the shadows so she won't be caught. And I hear her cackle through this mirror. Just then, the king, he remembered that he had been given these 3 bows from Elijah's bow. These strands, these hairs, and he took them, and as he had been instructed, he cast them onto that fire. Well, it was just embers. And just then, those embers, they erupted into such a huge flame, and the flame, it began to warm the room. And as it warmed the room, it actually began to warm the young princess. She started to turn back into blood and bone and flesh. And soon she began to open her eyes. She reached out her hand, and it was in that moment that the king grabbed her right out of that mirror. She was standing fully in front of him. She threw her arms around him. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Where's my reflection now? What do we do? Princess, I believe that your reflection has been returned to the mirror, but to ensure that she remains there, there is something that only you can do. I will explain. And he told her that she should take her head covering and cover her eyes, that he would turn her around, and that he had a lucky rock in his pocket that he would put in her hand and she could throw it. So the king, he did all that, and he removed that lucky stone. He kissed it, placed it in her hand. And with her eyes covered with that covering, she drew back her hand and she threw that rock with all her might. Crack. Can I look now? Indeed, you can, princess. And she removed her head covering and she saw her own vision all scattered through that mirror. She turned to the king. Can we leave this room now? I want to go back to my life. Indeed, dear princess. And he led her down that stairwell, and at the base was her mother and father, the king and queen of that palace. And the mother took her off, and they had what to discuss. But the two kings, they had business too. The king who lived there, he said, I owe you a great debt. And as I have promised, I will give you whatever you desire. The traveling king, he smiled. I have one request. Can I please have Elijah's violin? The king who lived there, he said, by all means, I will get it for you. But you know, in these parts, we call it by a different name. We call it Elijah's oud. And the king from that palace, he got a box, he gave it to the traveling king. And the traveling king wished them all well. And he left and he went back to his army and to his wise men and soothsayers where they were camped. They packed everything up and they set sail. And it took 7 days for them to reach their land.
And when the king returned, he brought all of the gifts that he had gotten on his journey, and he gave them to all of the people, fine foods and fabrics and clothing and riches. And then he came back to his palace to his 3 daughters. And the oldest daughter, who had requested a jewel, a brooch, he gave her a beautiful brooch. And the second daughter wanted a luxurious gown, and he had that for her. But when he came to his 3rd daughter, he didn't give her anything. He just waited. And she didn't ask about the gift. Oh, the old man had said, see if she asks you, because if she doesn't ask you, then she knows nothing about it. And we know that folk tales and fairy tales can be roadmaps, psychological roadmaps. And for this one, we wonder if she didn't ask about it, was it because she didn't remember, she didn't know, or was she perhaps avoiding something? Maybe she wasn't sure, but she did finally ask him, or he did finally give her the violin, the beautiful case with the violin.
And that's the end of the story, right? Oh, I'm just sitting here thinking, finally, it all worked out. Yeah, is that the end?
Karen, hold your horses here. Yes, it was a quest. It was a journey. The king went off. He had a mission to do. He accomplished it. He released the stone princess from her captivity. He got Elijah's violin, which, of course, is Elijah's violin in the version that we have from Howard Schwartz's book, but Elijah's oud, because Howard Schwartz he originally got the story from a woman from Egypt named Flora Cohen, who narrated it to him, and in that it was the oud. But this is not the end of the story. There's more. Because of course we still have a little more time, and this is a complicated story that has an outgoing journey, but then almost a mirror image journey, because there's still the question of what that oud or that violin is.
Sorry that I interrupted. I thought it was the end, and I was just ready to apply. So okay, let me go out.
Okay, thank you. So he gave it to her, and at first she did nothing with it. She put it off in the closet, and then after a couple of days, she took out that case. And she took out the oud, and she took out a feather that was in the case, and she began to pluck the oud with the feather. And beautiful music came out of it, like the music we heard. And then suddenly there appeared a handsome young man. She was amazed. She looked at the young man. He looked at her. They both smiled. And he explained that he was the son of the king in that distant land where her father had gone, and that when her father had come to speak with his father, he immediately wanted to come and see her. And so he had his servants create an underground tunnel that would come all the way from that faraway palace to her palace. And then he showed her where he had come into her chamber through a glass opening. And they sat, they talked, they listened to each other, they told about themselves, they smiled, they enjoyed. She had servants bring in food and they shared the food. But then it was time for him to go back. And so he left out through that glass opening again, and she put the oud away. But as she looked around, she noticed that he had left his hat. But no worries, because she knew how to conjure him back into her chamber. And after a few days, she longed for him. And so she took out the oud and she played the oud. She plucked it gently again with that feather. And there he was, coming through the glass opening again. And so it was, every time she wanted to see him, all she had to do was play the oud and he would come. And each time he came, they shared stories. They sat closer and closer together. They even shared rings. They betrothed themselves to each other. And each time he left, each time he left behind a garment, a hat, a glove, a vest, a shirt. You can imagine that they were becoming more and more comfortable with each other as the time went on. But then things changed.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, they did change. It seems that one day, her sisters, they all gathered together in the young princess's room, as sisters always do. They sit on the bed and they chit-chat and gossip. But when the older two sisters were actually sitting on their younger sister's bed, well, they noticed a hat that belonged to some guy, a shirt, a pair of socks, a sweater. They were horrified. Their sister was clearly having somebody in her room and not letting anybody else know about this secret. But they did not let on. They played the game. They just had a great afternoon. But no sooner did they leave their young sister's room, they immediately stole away to one of the sisters' rooms and they began to talk, and they said, we need to find out what our little sister is up to. What can we do? They thought, they pondered. The eldest sister, I know. Let's invite her to come to the bathhouse with us. Oh, good idea. And then the middle sister said, I know. While we're walking to the bathhouse, I can simply say that, I forgot something. Oh, good idea. And then you can go back and search her room while I'm with her at the bathhouse. Exactly. And so it came to be that the eldest sister invited the young sister to come with them.
Excuse me. I just have to say, I'm a little concerned about this. Are you saying that there are 3 sisters and the 2 older ones are plotting against the younger one?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But who are you? And you're interrupting my
Let me just
story.
say, from experience, this is a very difficult, traumatic situation, because I had 2 older sisters. They were my stepsisters, and they were not very nice. And they plotted against me, and there was a whole ball, and they were invited, and I was not invited. It was very sad. So let me just say, tell the youngest sister in your story that she probably needs to find a fairy godmother. She needs to have some mice that get turned into coachmen and have a coach and things like that. And whatever she does, if she gets near the prince, please drop a shoe. That's going to be very important. She needs to drop a shoe.
No, I don't know who you are. What?
I'm Cinderella, and I'm just speaking from experience. That's all I can say. I've said my piece. Good luck.
But Cinderella, you're in the wrong story. There are no mice. There's no coach. There is no, I don't know. Yes, there are 2 sisters, and yes, they're plotting. But I mean,
well, I'm sorry. I just recognized my motif, and I felt like I had to speak up. Go on.
Well, you might be right. There could be a little bit of a motif. Maybe that old woman. I don't know. Okay, let me get back. Oh, where was I now? Oh yeah, I know where I was. So on the day that they were going to the bathhouse all together, the middle sister suddenly said, "Ah, goodness, what a nincompoop I am. I forgot the soap and the bath salts. I'll just go down back to my room and I'll go and get it." And so she went off. And the eldest sister took the youngest sister to the bathhouse. But she didn't go to her room. No, she went straight to her young sister's room and she began searching. She was looking for a man, or how a man could possibly get into the room. She looked under the bed. She looked in the closet, behind the closet. She tore that place apart. She then spotted this glass opening and she thought, maybe that's how he gets in. So with spite, she took that soap that had been in her pocket and she pulled it out and she threw it, and crack, the opening broke. The soap dropped to the floor. She went to pick it up, and it was in that moment that she saw that box that her father had given to the young girl. She opened it up and there was an instrument. Maybe that's how he gets in. So she began to play it, pluck it. I don't know. But the music, it did bring the prince, or that man, all the way towards that broken glass. But he could not pass through. And a shard, it stabbed him and he started to bleed. And all he could do was go back from wherever he came and lie down.
Okay. But the princess, after this hot bath, we call it a schwitz. She returns from the bath. She's wet. Her hair is hanging down and she's sweating. And she looks in her room and she just knows. She knows. She says, something is wrong. She says, I want to see the handsome prince yet again. He might even admire me as I look coming from the bath. So she picks up the violin, or is it an oud? Let's call it an oud. She picks up the oud and she starts to pluck. She plucks and she plays. But her handsome prince, he doesn't come. What's the matter? I'm old news, she's thinking. Yesterday I was good enough. Today, what? Maybe because I'm coming from the bath, I don't live up to his dreams. And then she says, I know. My sisters, those naughty, naughty sisters, as many older sisters are naughty, she realizes they must have learned her secret. And then suddenly an old woman appears, lines down her face, by her eyes, an old woman with the wisdom of many generations. And she tells her, pretend you're sick, feign illness, and have a doctor come, a handsome doctor perhaps, and say, no visitors, just the doctor. It's a private moment. And then sneak out to find your wounded prince. And then this wizened old woman says, to heal the prince, the princess must pluck 3 strands, not from Howard's head, because there are not 3 strands, but to pluck 3 strands from the bow of Elijah's violin.
What excuse me, are you saying 3 strands again? Didn't we hear this already in the story? The 3 strands, like what? Why?
Look, this is a timeless tale. It is not for me to interpret it and change it for modern taste.
All right, already.
Just how about this? Follow the story and behave yourself. How about that?
Okay. I had to point out, I heard three. There must be some significance here. Anyway, I'll leave you alone. I won't bother you, Howard.
If you want to learn the significance of the number 3, I recommend the Kabbalah, which is Judaism at the PhD level. It's mysticism. But anyway, the princess must pluck 3 strands from the bow of Elijah's violin, burn them in the presence of the prince. The princess feigns illness and sneaks away.
The princess walked and walked and walked and walked and walked, and she was exhausted. So she lay down under a tree and she decided to take a little nap. Have you ever found that animals talk to you when you're sleeping and in your dreams you can actually understand what the animals are saying? Well, this is exactly what happened to her. She was lying under a tree when she heard some doves talking. Doves usually talk like this. Ooh, 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 ooh. But in her dream, she understood what the doves were saying. They were saying, "The king's son has been wounded, 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 and can only recover with a powder applied to his body made from the dried leaves of this tree." Or maybe the dove was saying, "The prince has been wounded, 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 and a map is needed to find the way. The map is in the leaves of the tree. Ooh, ooh, ooh." Well, with either interpretation, she woke up and she said, "I had the strangest dream." And so she decided to act upon it. She plucked a leaf, she read it like a map, and it showed her the way. Or if she understood the bird in another way, maybe she plucked a leaf, she dried it, and she ground it up and read the ground up leaves as a map. Either way, she continued on her way until she reached the palace. And there she disguised herself as a man and she introduced herself saying, "I am a doctor." Now, I must say that this part of the story is a little bit sexist for me because she had to disguise herself as a man to be a doctor. And the truth is that my mother was a doctor.
But that is what she did. She disguised herself as a doctor, and she came to the palace, the same palace that her father had come to. Her father had come before, and he had released the stone princess. But now she was coming to heal the prince who had come to visit her in her chamber. But she disguised herself as a doctor. And when she came, she was brought to the king and the queen. And the king said to her, "You are welcome here, and our son does need help, but you must be warned. 39 healers have come to try and heal our son, and 39 healers have failed, and 39 healers have been put to death." We have the same motif in this wonderful mashed up retelling of Elijah's violin and Elijah's oud. You see things, the underground passageways, the mirrors, and now this test for which the punishment is death. But the princess, disguised as the doctor, said, "I understand, and I will take that risk. But I ask that you promise me one thing, that when I go in to work with the prince, that you do not have any visitors come at all. You leave me alone in the chamber with the prince. And also that you have servants at the ready to provide me with whatever I may need for healing your son of this illness. And so the king and the queen, Karen, the queen was part of this too, she agreed and they agreed. And so the princess, disguised as the doctor, was taken to the chamber of the prince, where he lay on a stone slab, his face pallid. There seemed to be no life in him whatsoever. And the princess, disguised as the doctor, she commanded she commanded servants to bring in, it's a Jewish story, chicken soup. And the treatment would take 3 days. On the first day, she came to the prince, and the prince was there, and he was wearing black. And the princess, disguised as the doctor, said,
"You, dressed in black garments, pain me with self-pity. Drink or do not drink. I must return to my city."
And the prince somehow managed to sit up, and he took the chicken soup and he slurped and he drank, and then he fell back down. The next day, the princess, disguised as the doctor, came, and this time the prince was wearing red. And she brought chicken soup and she said to him,
"You, dressed in red garments, chill me to the bone. Drink or do not drink. I should return to my home."
and he summoned up his energy and he took the chicken soup and he drank, and then he lay back down. And so the third day she came again, but this time still dressed as the doctor. She found the prince dressed in white. She brought chicken soup and she said,
"You, dressed in white garments, you filled my heart and my head. Drink or do not drink. I shall return to my bed."
and he took the chicken soup and again he drank. And then the princess, she took the bits that she had crushed up of the leaves of the tree that the doves had told her, and she sprinkled it all over the prince. And she took those 3 strands that she had plucked from the bow of the violin, and she tossed them into the fire. And with that, the prince awoke, and color came back into his face, and he looked up and he saw the princess there. And he looked in her eyes and she looked in his. And though it appeared that there was a doctor, a strange doctor from far away, he recognized those eyes, he recognized those faces as the princess he had visited through that long tunnel, through that glass opening where he had left his clothing, where he had played the oud. And he said, "Is that you? Is that you?"
"It is. It's me. I've just been pretending to be a doctor, but you're okay. I can't believe it."
And he was so overjoyed, and they had exchanged rings. They were betrothed. And so he called out to his parents, "Father, mother, come, you must see." And so the king and the queen came as well.
What's going on?
"Mother, I've been healed. I've been healed. This doctor is actually a princess, and unbeknownst to you, I have been sneaking out to visit her, and we have betrothed ourselves to each other. We exchanged rings. And so, mother and father, I'm so glad you have come as well."
Wait. I am the father, and permission needs to be asked of the father. That is forever, always what needs to happen. So first, I need to know about this princess who rubs powder over your body in a way that some might find inappropriate.
Can I answer? Can I defend myself, please? Your son, he's the one who's been coming to court me, and I don't know, there was well, my sisters were jealous. They broke this mirror. Then there were these pigeons. I heard from this woman who, I don't know who she was, but she told me to ask for Elijah's oud or Elijah's violin. I did all that. Then she came to me again and she said, if you want the prince to be okay, well, I didn't know he was a prince at the time. She says, you've got to go and search for him. And then I did, and I went to sleep, and I was under this tree, and there were these talking pigeons, and well, the pigeons, or were they doves? No, they were doves, sorry. And they told me all what I needed to do, and I did all that, and look, I healed him. I'm pretty good at being a doctor.
Such a story. You are a marvelous
I'm just crawling. Oh my goodness.
Such a story.
Father, Mother.
Who's the king? Who's the king in this room? Who is the king?
Yes, let me ask you, Father, may I have permission to take this princess's hand in marriage to welcome her into our kingdom and our home, and she will be my bride. And Mother, may I have your permission?
Oh, of course. I already see grandchildren. I can already see little princes and princesses. Oh my! Oh, let me kiss you. I'm so happy. I'm quelling inside.
Is she pure of heart?
Of course I am. Absolutely.
Look at
Did you
me.
not hear this whole mishigas? It had nothing to do with me. I just followed the story and the path and did my part.
But my son is a prince.
But I'm a princess.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, prince, princess, Mazel Tov. I give my blessing.
Oh, that's what I wanted you to say. You were being so particular. I was getting worried. I just want the wedding already. I'm already planning. I'm already thinking the dishes, the cutlery. Oh, I can see it already.
But it's traditional that the woman, the wife's family, pays for the wedding. He's a king.
Of course.
He can pay.
But before you ask my dad to pay for a wedding, I think your son, who I love dearly, I think that he should find his way back to our palace, bring me home, and I can introduce him to my family. Because my dad will have to give permission too. If you have to ask your dad for my hand, I think you have to ask my dad for my lovely hand too.
And so it was that the prince and the princess returned back to the original kingdom, and they got permission, and a big, wonderful wedding was held, and the prince and the princess lived a long life together, and their joy was only enhanced by the beautiful music of Elijah's violin or Elijah's oud.
And the many children they had.
And there you have it, folks. That is Elijah's violin. And I just want to say the oud music you were hearing was from John Blazikian. Is that right, Karen? And the violin music was courtesy of a fellow storyteller and a good friend of mine who lives here in Atlanta, where I am, named Reuben Haller. I know that we've gone over, but we also started a little late. So we thank you all for listening, and we'd like to open it up. If you're willing to stay a few more minutes, we're happy to stay a few more minutes. We can come off spotlight and come back to gallery view. And here, if anyone has any...
Before I need to interrupt, before we go off spotlight, I want to give a big hand to Barry, who was the mastermind behind this story. He has spent hours joining two stories from two traditions, putting together a full script, rehearsing with us. So I want to give a big shout out to Barry Stewart Mann for all of your hard work in making this story happen. You were the Elijah here who went behind the scenes, pulled all the strings, and brought the beauty of this story to life. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Karen.
You're right, Karen,
but we just had so much fun together. We did.
100%. But Karen, we also owe a thank you. I know we all will agree to Yoel Perez, who lives in Israel, in Haifa, who so graciously translated the story, the Sephardic version from Flora Cohn, and it was told, there's Yoel with us, who from her daughter, Ilan Zohar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And we should
Thank
also
you,
just
Yoel.
acknowledge other folks who were part of the original planning, Jim Brule and Rena Shelef and Noah Baum and Evan Kent, I think, was part of us at the beginning. So thank you all very much.
And of course, I want to thank Eric for
Yeah.
coming up with the idea to even do such a thing as a long form Jewish story. So Eric, here's to you. Thank you for the beauty of this festival, for joining us all together. We could not do this in person. So this is something that has been unique to the pandemic, making the world a smaller place so we can share a story on the same platform together. Thank you, Eric.
thank you.
Thank you.